Picture this. It's 1999. You're sitting in a dark theater. The grainy footage flickers to life. 3 film students walk into the woods. They never walk out. But here's the thing that kept you awake for weeks afterward. You weren't sure if you just watched a movie or actual footage of someone's final moments. Welcome to the phenomenon that blurred reality so completely, police stations received calls asking about the missing students. This is the story of how the Blair Witch Project didn't just scare audiences, it made them question everything they thought they knew about what's real. The legend that never was, but felt like it should have been. Let's get the uncomfortable truth out of the way first. The Blair Witch isn't real. There never was an Elly Kedward tortured and left to freeze in the Maryland wilderness in 1785. There was no hermit named Rustin Parr who murdered 7 children in his basement while claiming an old woman's ghost commanded him. The entire mythology, every police report, every historical detail, every chilling testimony was fabricated by 2 independent filmmakers named Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. But here's what makes this fascinating. They created a legend so detailed, so convincing, so thoroughly researched feeling that it felt more authentic than some actual historical events. The Blair Township doesn't exist. Burkittsville, Maryland is real, but its residents had never heard of any witch until tourists started flooding their town, cameras in hand, looking for supernatural evidence. The filmmakers were students at the University of Central Florida's film program when they conceived this idea. They asked themselves a simple question. What if we made a horror film that people genuinely believed was real? What they created was more than a movie. It was a shared delusion, a mass hysteria event, a cultural moment when fiction and reality danced so close together that millions of people couldn't tell them apart. The marketing campaign that changed everything. This is where the genius truly shines. In 1999, the internet was still young. Social media didn't exist. Most people were still using dial-up connections. But Myrick and Sanchez understood something that Hollywood studios didn't. The internet could make people believe anything. They launched BlairWitch.com a year before the film's release. This wasn't your typical movie website with trailers and showtimes. This was a documentary of a tragedy. There were fabricated police reports with official-looking headers and case numbers. There were interviews with Burkittsville residents recounting the legend their grandparents told them. There were grainy childhood photographs of Heather Donahue, Joshua Leonard, and Michael C. Williams, the 3 students who disappeared. The actors' families received sympathy cards. People sent donations to help fund the search. The film's IMDb page listed all 3 leads as missing, presumed dead. At the Sundance Festival in 1999, where the film premiered, the directors handed out missing person flyers. Festival attendees weren't entirely sure if they were watching a film or evidence in an ongoing investigation. This was viral marketing before viral marketing was even a term. It was transmedia storytelling before anyone knew to call it that. It was the birth of something new, the understanding that a story could live beyond the confines of a movie screen and spread like wildfire through the emerging digital landscape. What actually happened in those woods? The production itself was as unconventional as everything else about this project. The entire film cost approximately $60,000 to make, pocket change even by independent film standards. The 3 actors were paid around $1,000 per week for what would become 8 days of genuine psychological endurance. Here's how it worked. Heather Donahue, Joshua Leonard, and Michael C. Williams were given a basic outline of the story and their character backgrounds. They were taught how to operate the two cameras, a 16mm film camera and a high-8 video camera. Then they were essentially sent into the woods outside Burkittsville with GPS trackers and very limited supplies. Each day, the directors would leave them film canisters and handwritten notes in milk crates placed at GPS coordinates. The notes contained basic instructions. Today, you'll find stick figures. React naturally. Tonight, you'll hear strange sounds outside your tent. The actors didn't know what was coming. Their fear, confusion, and growing panic were completely authentic. The directors would stalk them at night, making strange noises, shaking their tent, leaving mysterious rock piles and those now infamous stick figures hanging from trees. The actors were deliberately deprived of sleep and given less food than they wanted. The increasing tension in the footage, the arguments that break out, the moment when Heather breaks down crying into the camera lens, that wasn't acting. That was three people genuinely frightened, exhausted, and emotionally raw. The final scene in the abandoned house is perhaps the most chilling example of this technique. The actors had never seen the house before. They were given coordinates and told to enter with cameras rolling. What you see on screen is their genuine first reaction to exploring a dark, decaying structure, not knowing what they'd find. Michael's final image, standing frozen in the corner, was an instruction given to the actor, but Heather and Josh didn't know it was coming. Their terror discovering him is real. The horror of nothing. Why it worked so well. Traditional horror films of the era relied on jump scares, elaborate monster costumes, and buckets of gore. The Blair Witch Project offered none of that. You never see the witch. You never see any supernatural entity. There are no special effects budget to speak of. Instead, the horror comes from implication. The stick figures could be just sticks arranged by bored hikers, but they feel ominous. The rock piles could be natural formations, but they seem deliberate, ritualistic. The sounds at night could be animals, wind, the settling of trees, but they sound like something watching, waiting, circling. The film taps into primal fears that special effects can't touch. The fear of being lost in the wilderness, the fear of darkness, the fear of something unknown tracking you, the fear that you've stumbled into something ancient and angry and beyond human understanding. It's the same fear that kept our ancestors huddled around campfires, convinced that something dangerous lurked just beyond the light. The shaky amateur cinematography that some critics complained about, that's precisely what made it feel real. Real people don't have Steadicam operators following them. Real footage is chaotic, poorly lit, badly framed. The technical flaws became the film's greatest strength. The mythology that feels too real. Even knowing it's fiction, the backstory is unsettlingly well crafted. The legend, as presented in the film, goes like this. In February 1785, Elly Kedward was accused of witchcraft by several children in the township of Blair, Maryland. She was banished during a particularly harsh winter, tied to a cart, and left in the woods to die. The townspeople assumed she'd freeze or be torn apart by animals. She was never seen again. The following winter, all of her accusers and half of Blair's children vanished. Terrified, the remaining residents fled, vowing never to speak the name Elly Kedward again. The township was abandoned. In 1824, Burkittsville was founded near the site of the former Blair Township. The town prospered, and the dark history was forgotten. In 1940, an 8-year-old girl named Emily Hollins went missing near Tappy East Creek. A massive search was conducted, but she was never found. From May 1940 to May 1941, 7 more children disappeared from Burkittsville. Eventually, a reclusive hermit named Rustin Parr emerged from the woods and walked into a local market, calmly announcing, "I'm finally finished." Police searched his cabin and discovered the bodies of 7 children in the basement. Each had been ritually murdered. During his trial, Parr claimed that the ghost of Elly Kedward appeared to him and commanded him to commit these acts. He said she told him to make one child face the corner while he killed the other. Parr was found guilty and hanged. It's elaborate, it's detailed, it references real elements of American folklore, witch trials, mysterious disappearances, ritualistic killings. It feels like something that could have happened. That's what makes it so effective. Myrick and Sanchez studied actual folklore and urban legends, understanding what makes a story feel authentic. They borrowed the structure of real American legends, the accused woman, the vengeful spirit, the pattern of disappearances, the confessor who claims supernatural influence. They just invented the specifics. The real town, the fake legend. Burkittsville, Maryland is a real place. It's a small, quiet town with a population of around 150 people. Before the movie, it was known for nothing in particular, just a pleasant rural community near the Appalachian Trail. After the movie, everything changed. Tourists flooded in. Ghost hunters came with equipment. Film buffs took selfies. People knocked on doors asking about Elly Kedward. They wandered into the woods looking for stick figures and abandoned houses. They left rock piles as homages to the film. The residents were not amused. They had to repeatedly explain that the legend was completely made up, that no witch ever lived there, that no children were murdered by a hermit. The town's historical society was overwhelmed with inquiries. Signs had to be posted. The attention became so invasive that the town eventually embraced a "please leave us alone" stance. It's a strange form of fame, being known worldwide for something that never happened to you. The phenomenon that couldn't be contained. When the Blair Witch Project was released nationally on July 30th, 1999, it became an immediate sensation. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. People emerged from theaters genuinely unsettled, unsure what they'd just watched. Was it real? Was it fake? How much was true? The film grossed nearly $250 million worldwide against its $60,000 budget, one of the most profitable independent films ever made. It proved that innovation and psychological horror could trump big budgets and star power. But more than that, it changed the landscape of horror filmmaking. Suddenly, found footage was a legitimate genre. Films like Paranormal Activity, REC, Cloverfield, and countless others followed in its wake, all using that same "is this real" aesthetic to unsettle audiences. It also changed marketing. Studios realized the internet could be a powerful tool for building anticipation and creating immersive experiences. Alternate reality games, cryptic websites, viral videos, all of this became standard practice after the Blair Witch Project demonstrated its effectiveness.
The legacy that won't die. 25 years later, the Blair Witch Project remains culturally significant. There have been sequels, Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 in 2000, which abandoned the found footage format and was poorly received, and Blair Witch in 2016, which returned to the format but couldn't recapture the original's magic. There have been video games, comic books, and novels expanding the mythology. But the original stands alone because it captured lightning in a bottle. You can never truly replicate that first-time experience of not knowing if what you're watching is real. Once the trick is revealed, once the methodology is understood, it loses its power. That's why the sequels failed. Audiences knew the witch wasn't real. Yet even knowing it's fiction, watching the original Blair Witch Project remains an unsettling experience. Those stick figures still provoke unease. The sounds in the dark still raise hackles. Heather's tearful confession to the camera still feels painfully real. Michael, standing in the corner, still delivers that gut punch of dread. What makes a story true? This brings us to the deeper question. Does it matter if a story is factually true, if the emotions it provokes are genuine? The Blair Witch never existed, but the fear she inspired was very real. People had nightmares. They checked their backyards for stick figures. They second-guessed camping trips. The filmmakers created a modern folklore, a campfire story for the internet age. And like all effective folklore, it touches something primal in us. The fear of the woods, the fear of old wrongs that demand vengeance, the fear that some evils are too ancient to understand or escape. In that sense, the Blair Witch is real, not as a historical figure, but as a cultural entity, a shared nightmare, a collective story we all agreed to believe in, if only for 81 terrifying minutes. So, here's what we know for certain. 3 actors went into the woods with cameras in 1998. They weren't actually lost. They weren't actually terrorized by a supernatural entity. They were making a movie using innovative techniques that blurred the line between performance and reality. But millions of people felt genuine fear watching their footage. Countless viewers had nightmares. The film changed horror cinema forever. It demonstrated that the most effective scares come not from what you show, but from what you suggest. Not from the monster jumping out, but from the possibility that one might. The Blair Witch Project succeeded because it understood a fundamental truth about fear. Our imagination is far more terrifying than anything a special effects team could create. Give people just enough, strange sounds, ambiguous symbols, escalating dread, and their minds will fill in the rest with something far more horrifying than you could ever explicitly show. That's the real magic of the Blair Witch. Not that she existed, but that we believed she could exist. Not that 3 students died in those woods, but that we feared they might have. The greatest trick the Blair Witch ever pulled was making us forget she was never there at all. So, the next time you're in the woods and you see sticks arranged in an unusual pattern or hear something circling your campsite in the dark, remember, the Blair Witch may be fiction, but the fear is yours to keep. Sweet dreams. What about you? Did the Blair Witch Project scare you when you first saw it? Did you believe it was real? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear about the first time this film got under your skin. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of horror's most influential films, smash that like button and subscribe for more explorations of the movies that terrified a generation.
Until next time, stay out of the woods.